Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is Hannah if you're new here. Welcome back everyone, and we're wrapping up 2023. These are the final books I was able to finish at the end of the year. It's been a little bit since I read some of these, so I may not have the vocabulary to talk about a lot of these books, but we're gonna do our best and get through this rather quickly so we can discuss 2024 reads. So in November, I wanted to finally wrap up The Faithful and the Fallen series, Valor, Ruin, and Wrath. This is books 2, 3, and 4 of The Faithful and the Fallen, and I love this series. I read the first book in October and then binge read the last 3 books in the series, and these are not small books. This is a classic fantasy setup in which there is a avatar chosen one for the light and an avatar chosen one for the darkness, and the two have to fight it out for the sake of the fate of the world. You know, one of those classic tales, and I loved this series so much. It starts out really strong, and I think each subsequent volume is incredible. I will say I gave the first 3 books pretty much 4.5 or 5 stars, and the 4th book is a 4-star read. Not that it's bad or by any means in any way, but it's so hard to wrap up series well in a satisfying way, and I think John Gwynne did a really good job, but there were just a few things that I didn't love about the conclusion of this series. So it's a 4-star. I still really enjoyed it and had a great time, but it's just not my favorite volume of the 4, and I need to put these down. Then we have Alone with You in the Ether by Olivia Blake. This is the final book by this author in her backlist that I have to read, and this is a contemporary fiction novel, which I thought it was fantasy because all of their other work is fantasy or speculative in some way, and this is purely fiction, and so that's on me. But I also just wanted to explore this author's work, and I mean, surprise, surprise, I don't think this was for me. I'm actually not rating this book. This is a love story, and there are some problems with it that, again, I don't know if I have the vocabulary to fully talk about, but if you're interested in this book, I would read actually the end of the book. The author has an author's note about why she wrote this story, and I think that's very important to read before you read this book. There is an element of the main character has a mental disorder, and the discussion around medication and being medicated and being an artist, and there are lots of discussions like that in this book, and the author herself has the mental disorder that the main character does. So obviously she's speaking from personal experience when it comes to this disorder and how the main character handled it, but I just want people to be cautious going into this one. There is an element of, like, I don't even want to say the messages in here, I'm not sure the author executed it to her fullest extent. I'm trying to be vague, but I'll just say it. So the main character, like, essentially goes off of her meds in order to fall in love and to feel worthy of love. She feels like she needs to be off her medication, and that's a really complicated message to say, and the author at the author's note says, please don't stop taking your medication, but then the message of the book is the main character feels like she needs to be off of her meds. So I don't have the nuance to be able to discuss this, but please, like, be careful when picking this one up. Again, I'm not rating it. This is not the type of story for me. It did make me think a lot, which I guess is something, but overall just not something that I found valuable for me personally. Let's talk Bookshops and Bone Dust by Travis Baldree, the prequel to Legends and Lattes. Unfortunately, this one was a 3-star. This one was fine. I liked revisiting Viv as a main character. However, I think because this is a prequel, the plot of this is, and the character interactions are slightly trivialized by the fact that you know where Viv ends up, and you know a lot of these relationships don't last. So this one was just okay. It didn't quite have the same level of charm and warmth that Legends and Lattes has. However, it does have more plot to it. So if you liked Legends and Lattes but wanted more action and more plot, I think you might actually like this one better. Court of the Undying Seasons by A.M. Strickland. This is a young adult vampire, queer normative fantasy story, and it's a standalone, which is excellent. This is a really fun take on vampire lore, you know, having different houses, different colors for the different houses, and this is super queer normative, which I had a really great time with, and I overall gave this 4 stars. I think there were some things in some parts of this book that dragged slightly, but overall I had a great time, and I really enjoy A.M. Strickland, and I will keep reading her. Even though I'm like kind of past my YA days, my YA, you know, it's a heyday, I still think I have a great time reading A.M. Strickland specifically. So this is a good one if you're looking for vampire lit. The issues, I don't have any issues with the consent in here. It was, I think, really well done. And I, again, just love how trans and queer this whole world is and how accepting and loving they are. So this is a good one. 4 stars. Then we have Jade Shards, which is a short story collection prequel that you need to read after you've read the Greenbone Saga. And this was pretty good. I think I gave this collection 4 stars. There were some stories. The one about Ait Mata, who's like the villain of the saga, was excellent. I really liked that one. Seeing some of our favorites as young kids was fun. It was nice to be back in this world. Short story collections are really hit or miss, and I think this was a good one. Then we have Long Shot by Kennedy Ryan, and this is a romance, but please check the trigger warnings for this one. There is a lot of on-page domestic violence and rape. And obviously not the love interest, but there is an abusive partner in here, and it was incredibly hard to read, but I trust Kennedy Ryan to actually pull off a domestic violence story and put the care and nuance into it that is needed. So typically this isn't my type of romance, which is like super hard hitting and emotional and violent, and especially violence towards women, but I gave this one a shot and I'm glad I did. I think I ended up giving this one 4.5 out of 5 stars. I do wish that the main couple was together longer because we are in the abusive relationship for 60% of the book. I kind of wish the two were happy and together just a little bit longer. But if you like this type of romance where it's very hard-hitting and deals with really intense plots, this one might be for you, definitely. This is also a sports romance about basketball players, so there's that too. Then we have The Twisted Ones by T. Kingfisher. This is a horror novel, and this is not my favorite. This is a 3.5 stars, so I still enjoyed my time reading this, but this is not my favorite T. Kingfisher. I feel like she really hit it out of the park when it comes to the hollow places, which is another horror by her, and she keeps trying to do this trope of like young woman returning home and stuff is wrong at home, like the haunted house type of story. And I think she did a really good job in the hollow places with that. But this one just didn't quite nail it for me because I think she does such a good job in the hollow places. I can't help but compare her work to the hollow places. So maybe if I'd read this one first and then read the hollow places, I would have enjoyed this one a little bit more. But as it stands, this is not my favorite horror novel by them. This was creepy. This did have some creepiness, but it was a little repetitive in the creepiness, if that makes sense. So is good. This was good, but not great. Then we have Pucking Around by Emily Rath, and this was a book that I picked up thinking I would hate it, and there were parts of it that I actually genuinely hated, but parts I like genuinely cried over and loved. So this is a contemporary hockey polyamorous romance, and I actually had my poly friend read this, and they were like, there are some elements of the poly rep that are good and some that are really bad. There's one particular member of the polycule that is mistreated, and the men are all pretty possessive of our main character, Rachel. So that's not great. Specifically, there's a character named Ilmarie who is not poly, but he kind of gets forced into this polyamorous relationship, which is not super great. However, this was the filthiest book I've ever read in terms of the smut. Wow. Some of these scenes are not my thing, but dang. But also, this did have some really sweet and tender moments as well. Like I said, I did end up crying. There's a kind of a grand gesture at the end of this book, and I cried. So like really, really, you know, highs and lows with this one. So I ended up giving it like, for a book that I cried over, I kind of feel obligated to give it like a 5-star, but I can't give it 5 stars. So it's like 4.25, 4.5 stars, just because there are some issues with consent and open dialogue in a polyamorous relationship. This is an example of a monogamous person writing poly people, and the poly people are monogamous, are all previously monogamous people who decide to be a polycule, if that makes sense. This is not already polyamorous people deciding to be together, if that makes sense. And there's a little bit of a different dynamic, so they're discovering what polyamory is at the same time that they're venturing into a polyamorous relationship. And so it definitely reads that way. It reads like monogamous people in a polycule. So there is that one. The Wolf and the Wildflower is a historical romance where our main character was raised as a boy her whole life and got a degree in psychology and was able to kind of live her life as a man. And she ends up falling in love with this Duke, and he is emotionally scarred because he was lost in the wilderness for 10 years. And so they're trying to, you know, help him emotionally recover and like rejoin society. And the two of them end up falling in love. And so the interesting dynamic between like, should she tell her dad? Her dad doesn't know she's a woman. Her mom lied to her father all these years. So it's a really interesting dynamic. I gave this 3.5 stars. I think this wasn't quite as emotionally tender as I wanted it to be. This was fun and kind of raunchy for historical, which I enjoyed. And this like plot and the premise is wild, which I enjoyed. But overall, not quite up to snuff for me personally. So I gave it like a 3.5 stars. Like, I still enjoyed my time reading it. Then we have The Natural History of Dragons by Marie Brennan. Now, Marie Brennan is one half of the author duo M.A. Carrick, who wrote this lovely series right behind me, the Rook and Rose trilogy. And I was obsessed with this trilogy and decided to read Marie Brennan's other works. And this is the start of a 5 or 6 book series by her. And this is like kind of written as a memoir format. It kind of reads like a historical fantasy, if that makes sense. You know, everyone is kind of in Victorian bustles and that kind of like level of etiquette and that sort of thing in a fantasy setting where there are dragons and that sort of thing. And I really enjoyed it. I had a great time. This was super fun to read, and I can't wait to continue. Not much more to say. This one isn't maybe the most complex story I've read, but it was still a great time and a great dragon book, in my opinion. And I love dragons. We have Our Wives Under the Sea, which was one of the best books I read this year. 5 stars, absolutely a 5 stars. This is a horror novel about 2 women. One is a deep sea a marine biologist essentially, and there is a submarine accident and she's like trapped in the submarine for an extended period of time. And then we're also following her partner who is home, and we're following two timelines: what happened during the accident and then what happens after the accident. And this deals with grief and loss and moving on and relationships changing and letting go and all sorts of really intense emotions. And this is written gorgeously. Some of the best writing I consumed all year is this book, and I just loved it. And I think horror was an excellent vehicle for telling this story and exploring grief in this way, and I loved it. This is a horror for me. Slow paced, not much happens, but the writing was eerie and atmospheric and gorgeous, and I just loved every second of this book. I was like 2 pages in and I was like, this is a 5-star. and I was proved correct. Then we have The Deep Sky, which is a sci-fi thriller. We're following a ship as it's in space, and then we're also following a second timeline of the crew leading up to the launch of the spaceship. And this is like sort of a mystery because there's kind of an explosion on the ship and they're trying to figure out what happened, who's the saboteur, that sort of thing. So it's a mystery thriller in that way, but this is not thrilling in any sense of the word. This is much more character driven, which typically you'd think I'd like that, but for some reason I wasn't loving the pacing of this book in terms of the character growth. We were following like too many characters and too many points of view to keep track of, and they didn't super feel distinct to me. Like there were some characters that were very clearly like this type of archetype, if that makes sense. So those were easy to remember, but overall I just didn't connect with this story super great. I ended up giving it like a 3.5. Like I think this was fine. This was good, but not great. Then we have Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, which is like a classic gothic thriller, I will say. And slow paced, nothing happens, and this one worked for me, and the Deep Sky didn't, you know. So it really depends on the execution, truly. And I think Rebecca was excellent. While this is kind of a wild story about an unnamed main character marrying a man with a past, and the ghost, metaphorically speaking, the ghost of his ex-wife is like haunting our main character. The old staff always would talk about Rebecca, and our main character, especially because she's unnamed, really feels inadequate because of this. And it is a wild ride and an interesting choice. And what a narrative choice to have a main character kind of be subsumed by someone who is never actually on page in the text, but she's talked about constantly. I thought was excellent. I think the execution of this, I mean, some people will hate it and some people will love it, and for me it just really worked. And this is a classic that I think you should give a try. I didn't think the writing was too challenging or anything. I think it was written in the 1920s, 1930s. Around then, and I had a great time with it. I thought it was excellent. The last book I finished on like December 30th or December 31st was Remnant Population by Elizabeth Moon. I read this directly because Emily Fox, Books with Emily Fox, loved this, and she was right, y'all. This is a great pick. This is about a woman named Ophelia who has been a colonist on this planet for 40 years. She's in her 70s, and the company that she works for decides to remove the colony and all of its people. And she's like, my entire life has been on this planet. I'm not leaving. So she runs away and ends up living by herself as the only human on this planet for a very long time. And so this is partially a like slow-paced, almost cozy sci-fi in that she's kind of just living her life, trying to make things work and doing chores to take care of herself. And then this is like partially sci-fi story, first contact with aliens. I don't know if that's a spoiler, but like sci-fi, you kind of anticipate some sort of science fiction element, and that's how that manifests in this book. And I thought this was excellent. This had me crying. I don't think I've read a story about a main character in their 70s to 80s. You know, time does pass in this book. And this was about Ophelia finding new meaning for her life and discovering her passions after being suppressed for so long, and kind of reviving her inner child. And it was so beautiful to see that. And you know, I think we all need to be reminded every once in a while what it was like to be a child, and to let our inner child heal and grow and out to play every once in a while. And that's all this book was. This was about. And you know, finding meaning in life after so many years of being a wife, a mother, to a family, and you know, being a type of person, and then having the freedom to figure out who you want to be again. It was incredible, and I absolutely loved the character work in this book. This was a 4.5 out of 5 stars. Those were the final books I was able to read at the end of 2023 in November and December. I cannot wait for 2024 and really kicking the year off strong with more reads. What was your favorite read of 2023? I would love to know in the comments down below. And thank you so much for being here, and I will see you in another video of mine very soon. Bye.